everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while because the sickness during the reading rush at the end of July was just the tip of the iceberg. I got really sick after the reading rush and I was basically bedridden for at least a week. So, I'm back, I'm ready to record, ready to talk about books, and I'm going to start with wrapping up the immense, crazy reading month of July, because I participated in 2 readathons, the final Bibliothon and the reading rush. I read a lot of books, guys. I read 13 books, which is amazing. I rarely get to 5 books a month, so I well surpassed that and I am so freaking happy. So we're gonna start with trying to be very brief on talking about all these books that I've read. We'll start with just the first book I finished, which ended up being Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is pitched as kind of the superhero, supervillain story where a villain is the main character and she's bent on getting revenge on the superhero group called the Renegades. And I do really love the characters in this story. However, I felt like Nova, our main character, wasn't really the villain that it was pitched to me. Because of my perceptions going into the book were not exactly met to the point that I wanted it to be, I gave this a 4 out of 5. Then I finished Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a contemporary story where our main character, Claudia, knows her best friend Monday is missing. It takes place with present and past tense views, with before Monday went missing and then afterwards when she's trying to find her and trying to tell everybody that she's missing but nobody's listening to her. The mystery was very interesting. I loved it so much, and I was actually thrown through a lot of loops. There's also a lot of lingo as this does take place with a lot of the inequalities of Black Americans. It was very interesting. I read slang that I've never heard before. I had to educate myself. So I did very much so enjoy this story. I ended up giving this also a 4 out of 5 stars. Now we'll get right into the final Bibliothon. This was a week and a half of crazy videos that I'm sure you've watched and hopefully enjoyed. But I managed in those 9 days to complete reading 4 stories. First, I finished Niksi by Scott Renkin. This is a space journey where our characters are heading to a planet to mine a really expensive metal that has all these weird properties. And first and foremost, they have to prove themselves. These band of people from around the world are competing to get a spot to mine this metal on a foreign planet, and it's a crazy competition, and it was really interesting. I really loved what Scott Renkin did in the characters and the journey and the plot development. It felt very refreshing. However, for some reason I thought that this book was adult, but it's YA, and so it wasn't quite what I was expecting, and so it kind of threw me through a loop because you're pitting these teenagers into really just doing something kind of crazy, but they're doing it for a lot of really good reasons. So I did really enjoy this, but as it was just not quite what I was expecting because it's another YA book where you're pitting teenagers together, it was just not quite what I expected, and so I also gave this a 4 out of 5. Then I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book, I had anticipated it being a 5-star read, but it just kind of missed its mark. It wasn't exactly 5 stars. It didn't blow me away. I felt like the end reveal of why this lesser kind of non-existent known journalist is getting this hot scoop on this Hollywood starlet, I was really not quite blown away by the reveal, but I still really loved and enjoyed the story. It might not have been quite 5 stars, but it was 4.5 out of 5. I still really enjoyed the story. Really loved the representation of bisexuality and how just Evelyn Hugo's story just really encapsulates the era of when she started acting and how she became seen and famous. It was just so entertaining, so interesting, and I definitely really did enjoy this read. And I do love Taylor Jenkins' writing style, so I am highly anticipating reading more of her stories. Then I read Ink by Alice Broadway. Obviously, this book has a very stunning cover, which is one of the reasons why I got it, but the premise was very interesting. It's a society where you ink your life story through tattoos on your body, and as you die, people will read and judge your life story based upon what's been inked on your body. And our main character, Leora, her father passes away, and she kind of goes through this loop where she realizes that her father created a very serious crime, but she doesn't really reconcile that crime to who her father was, and so she's trying to clear her father's name. Things get crazy and so convoluted. One thing I do have to say, even though I really did enjoy the premise and the overall plot of the story, it did happen pretty slow, and there was a lot of kind of little tropey things that happened in the story that made it a little less enjoyable, particularly when it comes to YA tropes of friendship and lover betrayals. But I still did really enjoy the story, and I do want to continue on in this series. It left off at a really interesting point, and so I really want to see what is in store next for Leora. And so I ended up giving this book a 3.75 out of 5. Then the last book I finished for the final Bibliothon was Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This book is a crazy intense story. It's very futuristic, where humanity as we know it is not mortal. They're immortal. They have conquered death and illness and disease and starvation. And it's very interesting in the spin of an immortal society as they have to figure out how to control overpopulation and everything else. So they create this band called Scythes. And these Scythes go out and they kill people based upon how they used to die, all through algorithms and math and thought processes and everything like that. And our two main characters, Citra and Rowan, become Scythe apprentices and have to decide whether or not to take up the mantle of being a Scythe. I really loved how Neal Shusterman came up with this idea and went with it. I have to say that I have a very intense fear of death and dying, and so it talks about that a lot, and so my anxiety and my anxiousness just went through the roof on this book, and so it was a struggle. I had to put it down several times and take many calming breaths, but I still really loved this story, and I am kind of interested in the sequel, but I'm also not, and I felt like that was the same way with Neal Shusterman's Unwind. I read his Unwind book way back in like high school or something, and it ended, and I was very satisfied with the ending, and so I didn't feel that need to continue on with the series, so I never did. And I feel like this book is kind of the same way. I feel like the conclusion was very satisfying, and that as much as I could continue on, I don't feel this need to continue on, this draw, this just intense desire to continue. And that's why instead of a 5-star read, I'm giving it a 4.7 out of 5. I just wanted a little bit more of a hook into continuing on with the series. I actually forgot, but I did finish this during the final Bibliothon, and that was the monstrous graphic novel Volume 1 Awakening by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. And I have to say that the artwork is very stunning and beautiful. The plot was very interesting. I'm definitely very intrigued by our main character. However, I felt like the plot was very sparse in the sense where it leaves you with too many questions and doesn't give you enough answers. And I feel like that's a really difficult struggle I face with a lot of graphic novels. I am still very intrigued, and obviously the artwork just blows me away, so I'm going to continue on, and I'm so glad I found this graphic novel through BookTube. But I do also have to say that the end plot reveal I also was very prepared for and not surprised by it at all. I still really enjoyed it, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. The book I sadly did not finish during the final Bibliothon, even though I started it, was Old is the New New, which is volume 8 of The Wicked and the Divine. It is a graphic novel. I've been following this series for a while now, and now I'm kind of caught up and waiting for the volumes to be released. I do enjoy this graphic novel series as a whole, even though the last few novels haven't been quite up to the standard of the first 3. I do feel like this one in particular gave me a lot of insight into the gods' backgrounds, as this kind of goes through particularly Lucifer throughout the years of his reincarnations. And so it was very interesting, but at the same time, it doesn't really dive into the main plot from the first 4 of the novels as a whole. And so I'm definitely unsure and confused at how this series is really going to wrap up. But I'm still really enjoying this series as a whole and this graphic novel. I still really love the art. So I'm definitely going to continue on with the next one, and I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. Now we're going to get into the reading rush, which was a crazy week. Made some videos that were maybe not the best, but they were fun. In that crazy, hectic week, I finished a total of 5 books, which is amazing. I can't believe I read 5 books in 1 week. I finished first The One Only Avon by Catherine Applegate. I did really enjoy the story. I thought it was really cute. It takes place with Avon. He's a gorilla. He's lived a majority of his life in a secluded encounter in a circus-themed mall, and he has a few other animals and friends there, but now there's a new arrival, Rosie, who's a baby elephant, and in trying to cheer her up and trying to make her forget her tormented past where humans killed her parents, hits really hard on some aspects of life when it comes to animal cruelty and having animals captive, in especially not the best types of circumstances. And so it was very interesting. I loved this story. Absolutely loved this story because it was just, I felt like it handled the topic really well. Not only is it entertaining for me as an adult to read, but also in a way that children can grasp, as this is a middle grade novel. And so I loved it, and I gave it a 5 out of 5. Then I finished Aurora Rising by the awesome duo-ship Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, and I did very much so enjoy the idea of this story and a lot of the characters, but I felt like having a 7 point of view plot type story made a lot of the development and the characters kind of not work out as well as anticipated. It didn't give you enough time to really latch onto the characters, and it also felt like the plot was not just a setup book for the sequel, but also it could have been condensed. The whole time our main character Aurora was talking about going to this one place and everyone kept refuting her and saying, no, we're not going there, they end up there at the end. So I felt like everything that happened from the beginning of the book till the last location was just unnecessary, and even the big villain reveal at the end was nothing shocking. And so I definitely felt like more work could have been done to this book. I still enjoyed it enough. I did have a little bit of feelings for one of the characters, and I enjoyed a lot of the aspects that I gleaned from the characters, but I just wanted more. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5. Then I finished Complications, A Surgeon's Notes on an Imperfect Science by Atul Gawande. And as much as I loved his book, The Being Mortal last year, it was my favorite read of last year, this book just didn't quite hit the mark because it didn't have that unifying theme that The Being Mortal had, and so I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. Then I finished The Shack by William Paul Young. This book, I wasn't sure if I'd like it just because I'm not very religious, and I felt like this was probably going to be a very religious book, as our main character, Mac, is dealing with the loss of his youngest daughter. She was kidnapped several years ago, and he gets a random note in his mailbox telling him to return to her last known location. It is presumed to be a letter from God, but he's very skeptical, especially as he's fallen out of faith. And so he spends essentially a weekend with God and all of the other heavenly beings. I was surprised by really, really loving this book and the journey and just the overall arc and themes and the discussion of religion and spirituality in this story. So being very not religious, I surprised myself by giving this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read for the reading rush, and the last book I finished in July, was Resisting Happiness by Matthew Kelly. This is all about what is preventing us from being happy and keeping joy in our lives, and how we can really just push that aside, do better, and reach for a more fulfilling and happy life. I really did enjoy some of the tidbits and the tricks and the tips from the self-help book. However, as I stated before, I am not very religious, and this book is centered around Christianity, particularly Catholicism, as this author is a devout Catholic and even runs a business on promoting Catholicism in our New Age society of religion. And so it felt a little pushy when it came to focusing on religion to find happiness. And so I felt like a lot of the things in this book couldn't really help me in day-to-day life. So I ended up giving it a 2.5 out of 5. So there we go. There is the 13 fabulous books I finished in July. It was a crazy reading month. I hoped to keep the ball rolling for August, but with being sick, didn't quite happen, but the month is still young. Maybe I will push out some more books. Fingers crossed. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Thank you for sticking around and waiting for my return. I appreciate you guys. Know that I love you so much, and I will get back to my regular recording schedules, which is posting every Tuesdays and Fridays. So until then, remember that I love you and I really appreciate your support. Remember to do all the things. If you like this video, like thumbs up and subscribe and hit the bell so that you're notified when I post. And just know I love you guys. Thank you for watching. Bye!